I just barely finished recording my video on the double fatal bear attack that happened in Saskatchewan last week. But if you thought that video was a downer, in my opinion, this one's going to be rougher. The last time that we had an incident that was this terrible was in 2015, when a group of 7 individuals were on a canyoneering tour in Zion National Park and were caught in a flash flood. All 7 were killed. No survivors. I grew up in Utah. I know the landscape very well. It was designed to perfection for flash flooding. Some of you would say it was designed to perfection by flash flooding, and there's a lot of truth to that. That is how the landscape in southern Utah, those red rock wonderlands, that is largely how they were carved, is through these seasonal floods. And we are right in the middle of what is the monsoon season in the Southwest. And it can be an incredibly dangerous time to venture into slot canyons or drainages that are hard to get out of. And that appears to be exactly what happened last week, I believe on Wednesday, when a family of 5 individuals hiked up a drainage into a narrow canyon near Bicknell, Utah. I was in Bicknell just a few days after there was a double murder on a trail not far from there. It is difficult when this kind of stuff happens. And when there's some kind of a madman who's roaming around, there's a villain that can be brought to justice. But when it comes to these kind of tragedies, it's just tragedy. And it's really just heartbreaking. So this is what happened. I guess it was on Friday. I think I said Wednesday earlier. Apparently on Friday, this family from Provo, Utah, were, I assume, on a family trip together. They started hiking and kind of disappeared. Later, I guess there was another individual who in the same location and stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young boy in the drainage. That party called the authorities, who then began a search effort. They came out to the area to the young boy's body and spread out. Obviously, if you find just a young boy all by themselves, chances are very good that they were with somebody else. So they continued to broaden their search, and they found another young boy. And they broadened their search further, and they found another. And they broadened their search further, and they found 2 more individuals. A family of 6 individuals, 5 of them were killed in this tragedy. For the young woman who is the lone survivor, I'm sorry. I am sorry. And I know that saying sorry doesn't fix it, doesn't make it better. I hope that you have some other family and friends to rely on at this time, because there's no villain. They're just victims. And I know some people are going to be hypercritical because for whatever reason they are wounded, and they think that by criticizing victims or assaulting victims rather verbally after a terrible tragedy is somehow going to help them feel better about themselves. People are going to invoke natural selection. I've told you guys that natural selection is not a precise process. Anybody who thinks that natural selection just touches individuals to get them out of the gene pool, that's not at all how it works. It is a very broad, very clumsy, very slow, very imprecise method. It's not a guarantee that the rejects get removed, and there are a lot of rejects that not only have proliferated but have done so with exceeding veracity. There are people like that. They're not just magically removed by natural selection. I get frustrated when people invoke natural selection. It's really just a desperate plea to make themselves feel better about their existence. If they're still here, they must be superior to somebody who's not. And I think that's a pretty cruddy, pretty trashy thing to do. And it's not at all backed up by science either. You can argue that these parents, because not these children, but these parents made a poor choice. Flash flood warnings were abundant last weekend, but according to witnesses, the sky overhead was mostly clear. But that's exactly how these flash floods work. When you're talking about soil that has very, very little vegetation or bare rock, it's not like a rainforest on the Olympic Peninsula or something like that, where the soil and the moisture and the roots act like a massive sponge that can just soak up all of this moisture. It's not like that. You have bare rock or sand or dirt and light debris. This is a fundamentally different landscape. So you can be in an area and it can look sunny, it can look clear, And you can say, oh, we're good, and walk up a canyon and then hear the roar of a flash flood coming in your direction. And by that point, it's too late. I don't know how many slot canyons I have explored in my lifetime. Some of them are like the Zion Narrows, which are generally speaking very broad, but also very tall and very dramatic. There have been people who have been claimed, people who have died in the Zion Narrows because of flash floods. It's not to be taken lightly. You have to be aware of these things. And if there is a decent likelihood of any kind of flooding, it's best just to find something else to do. Zion Narrows is a little bit different because you have the National Park Service. They update every 30 minutes or so what the forecast is, whether or not there's going to be any rain in the drainage that potentially could lead to flooding. That is a very well supervised and monitored drainage system. But it's just one out of tens of thousands of drainages in the Southwest that are not as closely monitored. And so if you're ever traveling up one of these, you have to understand how these drainages work. Whenever I go into a slot canyon or a narrow space where I know I'm not going to be able to just immediately get out if there is a flash flood, I have studied the whole drainage. I have looked at the Doppler radar. I've monitored it up to the last minute that I can monitor it before I make a decision about whether or not I'm going into a slot canyon. Because I have been in slot canyons that are unbelievably narrow. I am talking the back of my head on one wall and my nose scraping the other wall and me having to suck in my diaphragm in order to move through. I have been in some incredibly narrow slot canyons, and I know how claustrophobic they can be and how helpless you are if the flood starts rushing through. These are incredibly beautiful areas, but if you watch my video on the Grand Canyon and how it's been claiming lives left and right this summer, you know that there is this siren song that pulls you into these places because they are incredibly beautiful, because they are mysterious and exciting. But there are also some hazards that you really need to be aware of. You have to understand how these systems work. You have to understand that every canyon is a drainage. Because there was water rushing through at one point before, there can be water rushing through while you're there as well. If there's any chance of a monsoon storm like there is right now up the drainage from where you're going to be, you should look for something else to do. All right? It's just not worth your life. As incredible as a lot of these places are, they are not worth your life. And unfortunately, they just keep on claiming lives. If you are getting into the outdoors, if you're wanting to explore these kind of things, I would encourage you to start slow. Don't just go onto the internet and watch some video about somebody's top 10, top 20, top 40, whatever destinations, and then just copy and paste them onto your to-do list. Because a lot of them are likely going to be probably beyond what you should be doing at the beginning of your kind of outdoorsy journey. You should have a lot more experience. You should try and educate yourself. You should understand how these landscapes work. It's the exact same thing with bear safety. You can be safe in bear country. I'm trying to give you guys the tools, grizzly country, black bear country, and even a little bit of polar bear country. We have the tools and the understanding to keep people safe. This is not black magic that we're talking about. We now have enough understanding that we can make intelligent decisions when we venture into these areas. We can do the exact same thing in the canyon lands of Utah or in the Red Rock deserts or the Grand Canyon. There are hazards in all of these locations, especially in the summer. The monsoon season, you got to be thinking about flash floods. There's also the heat. The American Southwest is this contrast between extremes. No water versus too much water. And that's just the nature of the landscape. And if you understand that, if you can read it, if you know when not to push yourself too far, you can have the most wonderful experiences exploring varied landscapes beyond your imagination. But there should be the foundation first. You should understand how to do it safely, how to do it responsibly, how to get yourself out if you're in trouble. I guess we could end with a couple of tips if you are in a canyon. Let's say that you tried to do everything you could, but maybe you couldn't check the Doppler. Maybe the Doppler wasn't as accurate as it should have been, because that can happen too. And you find yourself in a narrow canyon in Buckskin Gulch or the Zion Narrows or any one of numberless canyons, and you start to hear a rush, a rumbling, a thundering coming not from the sky, but from the canyon. The first thing that you should try and do is try and move up. You're probably not going to be able to race out of the canyon unless you're right at the mouth. If you're right at the mouth, then just get out of the way. But if you're in the narrow canyon, then do what you can to get higher, to get above where the flood is going to be. And sometimes these floods can be massive. The Zion Narrows, I think the record for the wall of water that rushed through the Zion Narrows was something like 12 feet. So there are places in the Zion Narrows where you can get up high, where you could get above the debris and the flood. You have to track those. You have to make a mental note whenever you're walking around and say, okay, this is my spot. If I hear something, I'm going to come to this location. I'm going to climb up. It's like bear safety. You have to be monitoring your environment. You have to see where there's cover. You have to understand if there's a river or a creek nearby that's going to affect your ability to hear or affect a bear's ability to hear you. You have to be aware of these things. You have to do the exact same thing in a slot canyon. You have to be looking for very specific locations where if there is a flood, you can seek refuge, because you don't want to be scrambling and not have a plan in place if water comes rushing down a canyon. Anyways, other than that, just be smart, err on the side of caution. All of us who love the outdoors, there is a kinship, and we understand that sometimes tragedy happens. And my personal feeling is that we should reach first for compassion. Yes, we should have an intelligent and informed discussion about how these tragedies can be prevented and avoided, but we shouldn't lose track of the human element. These are people just like us. They're no different. And there are any number of people who travel in grizzly country or hike up slot canyons or to mountaintops that are not prepared, who are just copying and pasting something that they've read on the internet. And just for the luck of the draw, they got ideal conditions and somebody else did not. So let's be slow to blame, slow to criticize, very slow to invoke natural selection after these tragedies. And let's show some compassion to each other. Anyways, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll catch you on the next one.
And if you want to join the crusade and defeat misinformation and arm people with the facts and fundamentals, please consider joining the Wild Spaces team by clicking join below this video or heading over to Patreon. You can also make a one-time contribution to At Home in Wild Spaces by clicking thanks below this video.